If the internet is your primary source of news now, could you also put your hand up? Okay, slightly fewer. And if you're a regular Channel 4 news viewer, or just from time to time, if you're a regular viewer, just put your hand up. Fewer of you. Okay, that's useful. In terms of sort of the topics you'd quite like me to hit, shout out a few. What are you interested in? Anyone? Politics, the election, business. What was that? Sustainable development. My goodness. Okay. Right. Well, as we go along, feel free to guide me in the way you want. Now, I'm going to talk to you. I want this to be as informal as possible, so I will talk to you for a bit. I'm going to play some clips for those of you who didn't know what any of that was about, and you can tell me what you think of them as well as we go on. But I kind of want to give you some career advice in terms of my experience and how I got into this industry, how I found it, and how I think things are changing in the media and how that might affect you. So I hope you'll take it in the spirit in which it's meant. And I will also try and touch on, I think, some of the big issues facing television news and media at the moment. And if you've got particular things that you don't think I've mentioned, ask me anything you want when I've stopped talking. I'm perfectly happy to try and field as many questions on a wide range of subjects as I can. On the face of it, I mean, you heard a little bit about my early career in the introduction. On the face of it, I don't really have a very helpful tale of how to get into television or the media or the higher echelons of this industry. Because I was at school when I first encountered the television industry. I was about 15. I used to do a lot of debating, and I entered the National Schools Debating Competition run by the Observer Mace. And I got invited up as a result of doing that competition to be in the audience of a discussion programme that used to invite groups of about 16 or 17 teenagers to grill public figures. It was called Open to Question on BBC Two. And we used to get guests from all over the world, British politicians especially. And I went up to Glasgow where it was made, and I asked a few questions, and I was quite noisy, and they started to think of me as a banker who they could always go to if the discussion dried up. So they invited me back a few times, and I did about 7 or 8 programmes over the next couple of years while I was at school, and it was all very exciting. But when I was leaving school, and leaving school intending to go off and be a doctor like my dad and my granddad, I was taking a year off, and so I thought, of all the things to do in my year off, including a bit of travelling, it would be quite cool to go and work for the BBC for a bit. So I wrote to that department of the BBC in Scotland and said, could I come and work as a researcher in my year off? And they wrote back very nicely and said, no, you can't. We don't take on people who haven't got degrees or other qualifications for that kind of job. But if you want to come do some work experience, you can come up and spend a couple of weeks with us working in the features department. And so I went up and I tried very hard to make an impression, and didn't just do the thing of sitting in the corner waiting to be told what to do. I threw in lots of ideas, I chimed in during the meeting, even when it was probably a bit inappropriate. Put lots of ideas down on a piece of paper, gave them to the boss, tried to impress, and on the last day of my work experience, he came in and took me aside and said, I have my eye on you, and I want to put you in the studio and give you a screen test. And so I went into the studio, and he asked me to interview my predecessor in the studio and do a few things to camera. And I walked out of the studio at the end of that, and he said, I'm going to give you a 2-series contract to take over Open to Question. That was the week before my A-level results. And so there I was, 18, with a show on BBC Two, thinking this is a weird thing to be doing in my year off. So I started doing it in September and thought, this is fun, and I think I want to do this rather than be a doctor. And so I wrote to Oxford, where I was going to do medicine, and so I'd like to change my degree from medicine to politics, philosophy and economics. And I worked full-time for a year before going finish university, and then when I went to university, I quit. But while I was at university, people kept offering me jobs. Because there weren't that many young people in television, and television was getting quite excited about getting young people on screen those days. And so I got offered a series of current affairs programs concentrating on Asia, for something called the Asian Programs Unit. They don't exist anymore, so the programs really targeted at individual ethnic minority communities, but they did in those days. And then in my third year at university, I was offered Newsround, the kids' news programme, on BBC One. And in those days, Newsround was still a big deal. It used to get very big audiences of 4 or 5 million viewers at times. And they asked me to do it part-time while I was at university doing my finals, and then to go full-time when I left. And so there I was, I'd gone all the way through university, and my degree was a bit incidental to my career. It was something that I was fitting in around working in television. I was in Croatia, in the former Yugoslavia, covering the war, about 8 weeks before my final exams, which was a very exciting thing to be doing. I interviewed Benazir Bhutto for a documentary in Pakistan, and I was doing a paper about South Asian politics. I was writing really obnoxious essays about, in private conversations, Benazir Bhutto will say X, Y, and Z. Which probably made me a bit unbearable to my choosers. It would be easy to sort of get to the end of my story and say, well, so education doesn't really matter. And I really want to warn you against that conclusion. And I'll explain why as we go through. I mean, what does my experience teach? Well, first of all, it teaches you that television, despite everything you hear, is quite meritocratic. It's not just about contact and who you know. If you've got talent, or the spark of it, then you get somewhere. I didn't know anybody. My entire family history is, you will be a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant. And if you can't do one of those three things, then there's nothing else worth doing. And so I certainly didn't know anybody in the media when I grew up, even though I went to a pretty good school in the north of England. Media bosses are looking for different, diverse, and young talent. Is the other thing that it tells. Even though that was back in 1988, nothing has changed. We are still on the lookout at Channel 4 News for different, diverse, young, dynamic talent. So the media isn't this closed-shop place where carbon copies from public school, Oxford and Cambridge, just get dragged in. Yes, I went to Oxford, but as you can see from the sequencing, it was kind of irrelevant to the fact that I ended up working in television, and quite an establishment part of television, where lots and lots of people went to Oxford and Cambridge University, became BBC trainees, did formal qualifications, and then got on the ladder. So it's quite open as an industry, is the other thing to say. Does the education matter? Well, if you look at my generation, the generation above, there are lots of us who either didn't do formal journalism qualifications, or some didn't even do degrees at all. I mean, John Snow got thrown out of university for mounting a student demo when he was at Liverpool against South Africa. And so he doesn't even have a degree, an undergraduate degree. He's going to be a lawyer. John Humphreys, who presented the Today programme on Radio 4, also doesn't have anything like the level of formal education that all the people working on this programme do. And there are lots of examples of very famous people who did not do it the formal way. But all of that has kind of changed, and it doesn't really exist anymore. The industry has become so competitive and much more popular as a profession that everybody now is qualified. Everybody's got a degree, everybody's got a postgraduate journalism degree, everybody's got experience as well. So the sheer level of competitiveness has driven up the demand for education. And beyond the qualifications, because if we advertise a job, we'll get lots of applicants saying, I've got X, Y, and Z in terms of qualifications. What we look for and what we know that people have got from their university experience is the crucial quality of journalism, which is to take in vast amounts of information relatively quickly, ask questions, think about it critically, be sceptical, and turn it into a piece of writing or an argument, or think about where it's going next. Those sorts of skills, which are the skills that you'll be learning right now as students, are absolutely vital in terms of giving our staff a competitive advantage. So don't look at my rather jammy entry into this industry and think what I'm doing is pointless. This is absolutely not. It's completely vital to the future of our industry. It's exactly what we're looking for, and what you do really matters. But the other thing I think is always worth. I always get frustrated. Well, not always get frustrated, but I often get frustrated when we have work experience people coming in to Channel 4 News. We're quite picky now about work experience because we get lots of people asking to come in, and usually the people we've got coming in are people who are doing media or journalism courses. But even then, they quite often come in and sit around and be told, and wait to be told what to do. I think it's a general rule now, no matter what your industry is, that if you've got the opportunity, you've got to try and stand out. You've got to try and make yourself different. And sometimes that will be a bit odd. I mean, back in 1988 when I was trying to impress the head of features of BBC Scotland, what did I do? I did little things. I wore a suit. I looked smart. I didn't act like the 18-year-old who didn't have an opinion. I chipped in during the meetings. Journalism and newsroom is all about people piling in with their opinions. We have a morning editorial conference at 9:30, and everybody, whether it's the editor's secretary or the editor or the graphics team or the cameraman or whoever it is, are welcome at those meetings, and their opinions count. And they, people from whichever bit of the newsroom will often say, "I think we should do X, Y, and Z." Work experience people never chime in, and because they're probably a bit scared, quite understandably. But it's really important to sometimes have a go, make yourself stand out, make yourself memorable, even